Please welcome Kathleen Loehr.
It's so great to look at all of you and know that you are just starting this unstoppable journey. I've been doing this work for 25 years, and I know the power of gathering together women of all backgrounds and what they can create together for the greater good of whatever cause they choose. So I'm going to start by telling you, I'm not talking about money today. Right, so we know that philanthropy is about the human good, but to be very honest, it often has started with philanthropy, you just want what's in my pocketbook. So I want to start the journey with you as we start with every institution that I have the privilege of partnering with how you might bring together the wisdom, the lived experiences, the backgrounds. And that starts with, and you know what? I need a clicker. That starts with this. It starts with community. When I think about community, I really am focused on the convening, the bringing together, the belonging. Women have been coming together for hundreds of years in this country, thousands of years beyond, to make true change in society. And often I think we've come together because we've been outside the power structures. We've been outside the legislative, any structure you want to mention, education, as Joe just said. We find our own way to come together. What I'm finding in institutions that really embrace the power of women and what we can do together, they are understanding that the first step is to convene, just like today is being a convening. It's just the beginning. But they are recognizing, as Joe said, we have not listened, we've not heard, we don't know how you view us. So this power of the community is the first step for you all. And communities across the institutions that I get the opportunity to work with have been very different. Some have been small. They bring together 25, 50 women, really to listen. Not once, not twice, 5, 10 times. Really, this group becomes the guiding force to educate the institution about what could be done differently, more resonant, and with greater impact. Others start with what I call a gathering like this, and they turn it into an advisory group. And then that advisory group turns and pivots and grows big communities. So William and Mary, which I'll talk about later, hoped that they would get 100 women to come into their community called the Society of 1918. That's when women were admitted to William and Mary, even though they were called William and Mary way back in the 1700s. But when they hoped for 100 in 1 year, they got 103 months because of the power of women turning and bringing in others. And I'll tell more about that story. But they are now 500 strong. So that's a community of 500. University of Chicago has 1,000. UCLA's been doing this for 27 years, well into the hundreds. So there's a wide range of community, and then it's a wide range of what communities might do together. There could be simply programming, how you come together and learn together and gain from the institution as well as give back. Others are doing much more integrated, and you're going to hear me use the word integrated a lot today. Integrating with how can we be learners, get to know each other, and also give back in all the ways I'm about to tell you. So there's lots of ways you will make it Lehigh. But as you create the community, I want you to think about 3 things. The first is this. It's so important, trust. Let's face it, Joe alluded to this. Institutions have not done a really good job in higher ed. When I get a call from my alma mater, and they know me, they are often saying, Kathleen, come back, come join this meeting. Kathleen, please fill out this survey because we really want your input. And my defenses go up. And I think you just want my money. It's just a ruse to get some support from me, just like I gave 3 years ago. But when we create community, when we allow for space, when we allow for the divergent experiences to be shared, stories to be told, what was your life at Lehigh like? How did you take that out? When we grapple together as community, we build trust with each other. That trust is really critical, because if we are to have collective impact, we need to be able to lean on each other. Then, as this community gets formed, trust is created with the institution. And it's two-way. What is the institution doing for this community? Here I am, a juggling mom with 2 kids, and I'm trying to figure out COVID, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm still successful at work. Are you doing any mentoring programs for me? Are you putting me in touch with anyone else? So those kinds of reciprocal relationships are also important for the community, the trust that gets formed between the institution and the community. And then third, together, often the community will pivot and decide together how they will give back in many ways to the institutions and causes they care about. So trust is up and down that chain. And as you build it, know that it's foundational. The next thing to imagine and understand is in building the community, you want to be incredibly inclusive. We often talk about communities of women, and people think, is it only those who are cisgender? Is it only those who present white? And I'm here to tell you it is not. And I'm doing it with this particular research report. You've been told that I've been part of the Women's Philanthropy Institute for 12 years. I chaired the advisory committee. We put out 3, 4, 5 reports a year. We now have 125 unique data points that gender does matter in philanthropy, just like it does in healthcare, just like it does in how we do our investments. Of the many research points I want to tell you, I could tell you, I'm not giving you a data overview today, but just high level. We give more. We're giving to more charities across the board than men. We orient ourselves more to bring in our network. We're bringing in our families. It's a legacy, how we teach philanthropy. Single women are outperforming single men, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 in many institutions. There's just an orientation of how we lean into philanthropy. For every $10,000 that I earn in new money, I'm giving 5% of it away. For every $10,000 that a male might earn in new money, 2.7 goes to charity. So there's an orientation for giving back. This particular report in 2019 was a seminal report where we looked at gender, diversity, and philanthropy. And what we found is when you hold even education and income levels, race and ethnicity did not change how women show up in philanthropy. So that is why I say to you, we want to be inclusive of all the lived experiences in whatever community that you create, even if it takes longer to reach out to very diverse networks, to bring in a wide range of backgrounds and thinking and experiences for your community to do the best for Lehigh. The next thing I want to talk about as you build this is impact. Impact, I talked about, we've been creating collective impact across this country for hundreds of years, but really, I want to talk about, we're busy. And so if you're going to invite us back, we want to know that it's got a compelling reason, that it's going to be purposeful. Right now, you already have a compelling reason. Soaring Together, really celebrating the 50 years, but also soaring together, how can Lehigh women show up and make a difference for Lehigh's future? That's a good beginning. But as you grow this community, you're going to have some decisions. How do we today want to have impact? And I'll give you an example. When I think about women coming together, I think about the partnership between the institution and the community that is forming. So a university, Elon University down in North Carolina, presented strategies to the group that they're forming, and they're forming a small group, just 14 women gathered together over about 10 meetings. They presented scholarships, they presented internships, and they presented wellness and mental health, critical for students today. The women really thought about it, and then they are leaning to it. They haven't made their final decision, but they're leaning towards internships because this is the collective impact that that community wants. They decide not to choose scholarships because it's being done. And as we as a community don't want to be just adding to something that's ongoing. And they did not want to choose mental health and wellness because it's new. And they didn't see yet Elon's particular way of addressing it and how they could enter into that and make a difference. They chose internships because they are strong at Elon, but they chose it in a way because they built a trusted community and a diverse community. They chose it because we have lived experiences of first-generation students who cannot afford to go and get internships, who cannot, if they get a paid internship, can't afford to go to the city and take the internship because they don't have the travel. They don't have the housing. So they were, yes, we'll probably put the money on the table to support internships and create both dollars for internships as well as wraparound, but they're also providing time. They're going to do informal mentoring of those students so they feel seen and held and understood as they grapple with this in their lives. They're opening up their doors, their networks, to be able to bring in more internships and have companies also provide support. So this is already an indication of the broad way we can approach impact, but I want you to know that you're going to want to have a compelling purpose as you begin a community of women at Lehigh. So you've heard me talk a lot about this broader definition of philanthropy, and what is that? Of the 125 data points we have from the Women's Philanthropy Institute, all of it points to the fact that as women, we hold a multi-dimensional view of how we provide support to our communities. And what that looks like are the first T's. You all know them. Joe spoke to them. The time, talent, and treasure. You're doing it right here. You're sitting in this audience, giving your wisdom throughout the day. But the other T's, which are trust, ties, and testimony, I think are really core for all communities that have been unseen by higher ed and by nonprofits. The trust I've already spoken about. Let me go a little deeper in that. Trust is trusted partnership. It's not simply, do you see me, do you know me, do you listen to me? That, of course, is important. That's also respect. And it's not just about, I'm giving you support, and are you using it the way I ask you to? There needs to be trust there, too. This is about bring us in early. Help us be partners with you to grapple with your strategies and how we can make a difference for you, with you, in partnership. Help us, just like Elon, figure out a new way, a different way that we could help Lehigh soar. So the trust is also about that partnership. And when I think about the 6 T's, I put partnership right in the middle. The other 2 T's are ties and testimony. I'm going to talk more about them in a minute, but in general, ties are the networks. Ties are our trusted relationships. Ties are our family. And all those we pick up the phone and call at 3 a.m. and say, can we get together? Well, maybe not at 3 a.m. But in general, it's how we have relationships that go out and broad. And yes, they may be Lehigh relationships, and they may be more than that, that come back to help. And testimony is our voice. Testimony is advocacy. It is sharing our story. It is inviting in. So let's go into that in a little bit deeper, because we want you to grapple with that today. If we ask you to give testimony about Lehigh, you're going to say, what is that, and why is that important? I can tell you why it's important. I recently just did interviews with Missouri State University, helping them start their own community of women. When I talked to their volunteer leaders and donors and some of their key trustees, one woman put her hand on her hip and said, Kathleen, just going to tell you honestly, had a wonderful accent. I can't do it. Going to tell you honestly, when I get an invitation from MSU to come to a meeting, when I get sent a link to do a survey because we really want your input, I kind of throw it in the trash. But when I get a call from a woman that I knew, or from someone who's on the trustees, or for someone who lives in my neighborhood and I find out is also going to MSU, you better believe I show up for that event. You better believe I give that input. So that is the power of testimony. Your trusted relationships always will supersede even any relationship with Lehigh. You are the ones that can bring in. So today we're going to need your time as your wisdom about how do we activate your voice so you can pivot and move towards your trusted relationships and ask them to join what we are trying to create here. The next piece is that activation that Joe talked about, which is the ties. I've learned that Lehigh has incredible ties with living groups, with band, with athletic teams. You go deep and you go long. And so how do we activate that for what Lehigh is putting on the table boldly and with full leadership support, that it's time to integrate all women of all backgrounds, all who now identify as women, and bring them into the fullness of how we are supporting this university. And only your ties can do that. You're staying in touch. You are having an impact on people that you hang out with. So we need you to help us understand how to activate those. An example of the power of activation, back to William and Mary, when they started their community, the Society of 1918, and hoped to get the 100 women, they got them in 3 months. It was because of the ties. 35% of those women were new. Not new to the women, they turned and went to their relationships, but they were new to William and Mary. They had not been seen, they'd not been tracked, no one was staying in touch with them, but the women were. So that is an important part about why your ties are so critical, because you are truly connecting us to people that we should have seen, and now we're committing to being part of this. So I give you all this background, a little bit of research, a little bit about how starting community is so important, but it will look different for you, and a little bit about the power and ties, because when you go into the afternoon, I want you to have bold ideas, but more than that, kind of really, what's really possible to soar? That word soar is big. It's also untethered. It's where you've never gone before. So I have found across dozens and dozens of partners I've been privileged to work with, when we bring in those who identify as women, diverse backgrounds, and we let loose, those women are giving bolder ideas than the institution ever would have come up with. And so Elon University did that with internships. Yes, it's a strategy of Elon, but they took it and ran with it and are going to make it last, not just make it a bigger strategy, but last for generations to come. So that's what we're looking for from you. How do we boldly activate our networks? How do we boldly use our voices? How do we boldly think about how our community might have impact? And as you do that, I just will echo what both Maria and Joe have said now, that you are simply starting a journey. You're creating a community, yes, but a community that's got trust, a community that is inclusive, that has good use of the ties and testimony, but really ultimately to create a collective impact. And this is only going to start now, and it will evolve. So I say you're starting an evolution and perhaps a revolution for cultural change. When I talked last week about women's philanthropy to the select group, I said this conference is about women's philanthropy, but it's also about creating the society we all long for. And it's time we see all historically unrepresented groups in our midst and bring all they have to offer forward. So here we're starting with women. And by the way, when you create a community, you do not have to have only women in it. Many of the advisory groups I've been part of have had men in them. So you're going to decide who's in your group, and you're going to decide how to make it integrated and inclusive and ready to last for hundreds of years to come.